Hey besties, I hope you have all had a wonderful April and thank you for coming back to another Journal with Me video. This month, Becca and I got to attend the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, which was our first time attending. Essentially, it's just this huge fair, like street fair, with all of these different bookish vendors. I mean, we're talking local authors, big name authors, stationery shops, bookstores, small theater companies, clothing shops that have bookish related goods. And then they had a bunch of like photo ops and little activities you can do that were all bookish related. It was a lot of fun. We kind of went not really knowing what to expect since we hadn't been there before. So we didn't do any of the panels this year just because we wanted to check it out. So we just went and walked. It was free for general admission. And I'm glad we went. It was a lot of fun. I think there's definitely things we would do differently next year as it is a very, very busy festival. And we were trying to get around with a stroller, which was not ideal. Anyway, we got this little newspaper type thing that had the list of all the vendors and a map of the area, and that's what you'll see me kind of chopping up to use as little elements in this spread, along with some photos we took throughout the day. Our first stop was to Paige's bookstore, and this was fun because they had a children's author there. So my little mini bestie got her first book signed, which felt like a little bit of a milestone to be a part of. And then I stopped to talk to a local author about their book. Emily Rank Murphy wrote this fantasy and mystery book called Of Mountains and Seas, and it is a Chinese mythology mixed with like shape-shifting fantasy, and it's a clean YA book that just is more of like a mystery mixed in with some fantasy elements. And I thought it was really cool to kind of hear her story writing the book and wanted to give it a shot. So you'll hear my thoughts for that in the next video. And we wanted to check out the Ripped Bodice booth at the Festival of Books, but it was like the lines were crazy. So Becca and I decided, you know what, the shop's open. Let's just drive to the actual bookstore and support them on Independent Bookstore Day. So neither of us had actually been yet, so we drove to Culver City and went to the Ripped Bodice, which was fun. We hadn't actually been inside that bookstore before. We did, however, make it a priority to say hi to our local bookstores, which is the Open Book, and that's that little sign you see on the bottom right. They had this kind of display in the bookstore advertising that they would be there, and they had a gigantic section of this festival. They're a big used bookstore, so they brought a ton of used books, set up actual shelves, and like basically made an outdoor bookstore for people to shop at during this festival, which was super, super cool. They put so much hard work into that, and I mean, it was popping all day long, so I know that they had a very good turnout. The festival had a lot of interactive moments too, so there was tons of activities for kids. There were big kind of wall displays where you could go up and write what you were reading and enjoying, or like lyrics to songs that made you think of books and like those kind of things. They also had a throne made out of Victoria Aveyard books, like larger than life Aveyard books. And that was fun. I definitely wanted to sit there, so we got a picture at that photo op. And overall, it just was a really fun day, a fun thing to plan last minute. Again, Becca and I did not really even decide if we were going on account of the one day it rains in California being the day we went to this festival. Thankfully, it was clear skies by the time we got there, but yeah, I'm so glad we went, and it was a lot of fun overall. This next page you'll already have gotten a sneak peek of if you watched my Magical Readathon journal. This is a readathon that I participate in all year round, and in April it was our kind of bigger readathon throughout the year. So My character is a thread mage, and they had to read 5 books for their classes this semester. So these are the books that I read. We also have a little flap over here for our guild book. This is what kind of my specific group read together. And I took some illustrations from that book, photocopied them, and incorporated them into my design. On the left here, I've got my syllabus and a spot for some extra classes. And this is just, going above and beyond the 5 required reads, and anything else you read kind of counts for extra credit. So I carved out a spot there, and I thought we could update that together. So for lore, I read A River Enchanted. For elemental studies, I read This Fish's Grace. For art of illusion, I read The Dressmakers of Auschwitz. And for shape-shifting, The Dragon's Promise. And animal studies is A Natural History of Dragons. G is always incorporating some new elements into this fun readathon, and this semester was no exception. You may have already guessed by the dragon theme, but there were actual dragons that we needed to rescue. So over the course of the semester, cumulatively, like all of us reading and participating in this readathon, our goal was to read 6 million pages, and we far surpassed that. I think I'm still waiting for the final count, but it's over 8 million, which is insane. So we went and we rescued all of our dragons, and just wanted to kind of put that in a story here, so I had all of the information. We also got to choose a dragon that we wanted to adopt at the end, so I went with the Starlight Dragon. I really liked the element of dreams that it gives you. I also completed the Goodreads Community Favorites Challenge, which went from January to April. There was 6 different challenges. You could choose any of the books on the list to earn these different bookmarks. A lot of the earnings I was doing kind of without thinking, just based on what I was reading already, and it counted for the prompts. But in April, I did need to read at least 1 book in kind of the nonfiction category. So I went with The Dressmakers of Auschwitz, so I could complete that. So I just thought I'd throw it into my reading journal as another fun little challenge I did this year. And speaking of challenges, let's hop into the front of my journal and update kind of my monthly challenges and goals that I set myself for the year. First, I've already written in all of the 10 books that I read this month and filled in their statistics. And then next on my Once Upon a Time page, this is just where I fill in a summary of the book in 1 sentence. I clearly do not have enough space to do this whole year, considering we're not even halfway through and I'm more than halfway through the page, but we'll solve that problem later. This is the most satisfying page. This is where you get to color in all of the physical TBR books. And this is also my last month of using blue, so we'll start to see some more colors on this page pretty soon. But this month I read 3 books from my physical TBR. There were just too many new releases this month that caught my eye. This pirate did haul 7 new books this month, which seems like a lot, but as we'll get into the Kraken Challenge a little later, 4 of them I did already earn. Thankfully, I didn't have any books to add to Walk the Plank. All of the books were quite enjoyable. Which brings us to Bounty. I'm just filling in my statistics here for all the books I read, pages, how many were print, TBR, etc. And adding in The Dressmakers of Auschwitz for the nonfiction category. I was also given the honor of reading 2 of my most anticipated books a little early this month, and those were The Betrayal of Eden by Erin Phillips and 6 Days in Bombay by Alka Joshi. And then I, of course, had to fix this Sirens cover because it wasn't centered, so that would have driven me crazy. Now I'm just going in and marking off the new releases that I have already completed on my list. And switching over to the crew, this is where I draw in the spines of all of the books that I read with my eyeballs. Most of the reading I consume is through audiobook, so it's been a challenge this year to read 25 physical books, and so far I'm really enjoying the challenge. This month in series, I read the first 2 books in the Six Crimson Cranes series. I read the first book in the Grimoire and Key trilogy, and currently that's the only one that's out, so I'm drawing in this little arrow since it's not able to be completed this year. I also read the first book in Elements of Cadence and The Last Finestra. On my BookTube favorites page, I wanted to kind of put in a thumbnail of the collaboration I did with Joshi and Rhyme and some other journal creators, as well as Chloe's reading journal. Chloe and I have connected over YouTube, and she wanted to start her own journal based on my videos, which was such a compliment. For book club, this month we read Broken Country and The Maid's Diary. And then we get into my reading challenges. And over here, I'm just pasting in our little dragon pin that we earned from rescuing the dragons and our destinations, of course. So last month in my Kraken challenge, I earned myself 4 new books, which was so exciting because April, there was so many new releases that I could not wait to get my hands on. So the books I chose were, of course, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the 5th book in the Hunger Games series. I picked up The Maid's Secret, which is the 3rd book in the Maid series. Fearless by Lauren Roberts. This is the 3rd book in the Powerless series. And then A Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, because I love her writing so much. So because those 4 were earned books, those do not count as feeding my Kraken. However, I did a little bit of damage in the thrift world as well. So let me show you what I got. First, I found this really cool arc of This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. It was $2 at one of my local thrift libraries, and I couldn't resist. And then another thrift store find was Little White Lies and Deadly Little Scandals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I'm obsessed with all of her books. The Naturals and Inheritance Games are some of my favorite series ever, so I'm excited to dig into her backlist a little bit. And these books were in perfect condition, so I couldn't pass those up as well. This is the book that I picked up at the LA Festival of Books. I got to meet Emily Rank Hawthorne herself and talk to her a little bit about her story and her journey writing this book and getting it published. And so that was very, very neat to see. She also included a couple extras for purchasing it in person with her, and then she signed it for me as well, which is a really cool experience. So overall, we have fed the Kraken 4 more books. And unfortunately, I only read 3 books from my TBR. Cast your vote in the comments if you think I'll actually successfully complete this. For Sail the Seven Seas, I'm adding 6 Days in Bombay, since that takes place in India. So we're adding that to Arabian Sea. These little book covers are so cute. Also checking off from my list. Then on book bingo, I kind of stumped myself because I thought that The Dressmakers of Auschwitz was on my list, when in fact it was The Tattooist of Auschwitz. So I actually did not read anything for bingo this month, even though I thought I did. So no progress here, but moving along. We do have a new letter for our alphabet challenge. This is going to get harder and harder as we go because there's less letter options to fill in. So now I have to start actually thinking about which letters I have left so I can choose my next reads accordingly. And then finally, Treasure Trove is just where I mark off the days that I finish a book. Pretty simple. Which brings us to Adventures in Aldea. I'm just going to move my little bear over here, give him a little break from our journey, so we can open up to the prompts for the month. The prompt in my journey was 4A, which was Cross the River, read a book with river in the title. So I chose A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. And oh my gosh, guys, this is probably my favorite book of the year. It was so magical and beautiful and lovely, and I loved it so much. I'm like, I don't want to start the next book because I don't want it to be over. I'm also pulling out these star stickers because I thought I would mark the path that I'm taking on this game board. So I'm just adding those to the prompts that I've already completed so we can kind of see how my travels have gone throughout this year in this adventure. This also brings us to our next junction. So I can either go to 5A or 5D. And there's different reading prompts for those. So we can either read a book from a series that is longer than 3 books or read a book involving dancing. So depending on which book I read in May will determine if I'm going to the left or the right. All right, now let's get into the book reviews for what I read in April. I am starting off the spread with some origami paper. Origami paper has been some of my favorite new transition into my journal decorating because it is so thin. It comes in so many varieties and like textures and prints and things, and it's more affordable than buying a ton of different stationery pages and scrapbooking pages, which I typically will only use like 10 to 25% of. So pro tip, get some origami paper because it looks so nice in the end. You could also just use a wide roll of washi tape here as well, but I like the texture of the origami paper. The first book I read was The Dressmakers of Auschwitz, which is a collection of memoirs about the women who were able to survive the Holocaust because they had very specific employment in making clothing for the military wives at the time. And I thought it was an interesting story and a part of the war that I wasn't aware of, and I didn't really know their stories before. So it was interesting. I think it's important to read books like this from time to time, even though they're extremely sad. But overall, yeah, I liked it. In one of my book clubs, we read The Maid's Diary by Lorthan White. This was a fun thriller. It's interesting because there is clearly a crime that has taken place, but we're not exactly sure who the victim is. So it's tough to pin down who, might have the motives when you don't even know who has actually died. I wanted to fill in a little bit more of this page, so I pulled out this Washi Tape Shop set of stickers. It comes on a washi roll, and there's so many different elements you can just pull and piece together. This specific roll is called the Planner's Day, and I really like it for filling in anything that has to do with books about women or reading or academia, and I thought that this specific image looked good and kind of coordinated with the dressmakers of Auschwitz. And then lastly, I'm just kind of roughing up the edge of this page to continue the torn edge look of my notebook. After tearing it, I stamp it with this little distress kit I got to make it look like it has burnt edges. And I continued that over the next couple pages as well, so that my journal was all ready to go with those special edges. Up next, we have 6 Days in Bombay by Alka Joshi. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. I loved her henna artist series, so I was so excited that she came out with another book. This story follows our main character, who's a nurse, and she becomes very fast friends with one of her patients who is in the hospital because she's been having some complications with her pregnancy. And they become fast friends. They really relate to each other on a lot of levels, and this patient ends up inspiring our character to take the chances that she hasn't taken in life. It's got a little bit of romance, but for the most part, it's just falling in love with yourself and the life that you make for yourself, which was really beautiful and refreshing to read. As for decorations, I just chose some scrapbook paper that I thought matched the pattern on the character's dress and added in a couple floral stickers. Pretty simple. And next we have perhaps my favorite book of the year, which is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I'm using some lovely origami paper and washi tape from the Washi Tape Shop to kind of capture the magical river that is in Cadence, which is inspiring this story. A River Enchanted is told with two different points of view. We have Jack, who for the last decade has been kind of on the mainland, but is coming back to his home island of Cadence because the princess is asking for his help since there are some missing children on the island. So he comes back to this enchanted space, and together they kind of dig deep into the history of their island and their clan to really understand what might be going on. And these secrets seem to go back generations. This story is mesmerizing. It is a beautiful story of folklore and romance, and it's just truly captivating. And if you're like me and are late to the party, this book is definitely worth picking up ASAP. I have not moved on to the second book in the duology because I don't want it to end. I feel like these are going to be my favorite books of all time. I really, really love them that much. Anyway, this spread, I'm just, again, using some origami paper in the corner here. And the bottom, I loved how this kind of wave pattern complemented the colors in the 6 Days of Bombay stationery paper that I used. So I thought those were nice next to each other. I took some time deciding where I wanted to place this book cover, but ultimately decided that here would be kind of the best place for it. And lastly, I just wanted to add in a little harp because our main character is a musician and he plays the harp, and I think that is a pretty significant part of the story, and I just wanted to showcase that there. Another one of my favorite stories of the month is The Betrayal of Eden by Erin Phillips. Now, I'm obsessed with all of her books. Last year, I read A Bond of Briars, which remains one of my favorite fantasy books, and I made this beautiful spread for it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to kind of do the same thing this year with her new book. So I'm going to do a photo collage, have a little flap showing my book review because I love how this spread turned out. So yeah, let's get into it and see if we can make it as good as last year. So I started off just printing off a bunch of photos that kind of reminded me of the characters and little elements of the story. And I recolored them in Canva so that they'd sort of have the same kind of color scheme and look aesthetic together. And then for the flap, I'm placing a larger square picture on top of some craft paper, leaving a little bit extra on the edge so that I can fold it over and attach it to the page. Also, we are at the point in my journal now where the left side of the page is very curved because all of the, filled in pages beforehand. So for the sake of collaging and having pictures like stay in place, I'm going to put my review side on the more curvy left side of the page and the collage on the right side. And as I collage, I thought I would tell you a little bit about this book because it was one of my favorites for the month and I've been anticipating it for quite a while. So, The Betrayal of Eden is a gender-swapped retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo. Erin Phillips tells this story in a YA perspective, and she does like a fantasy spin on the story as well. So the story feels entirely new, but if you're familiar with the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, you see the little nods and connections that she's made to the original story and how things are connected. But beyond that, it's entirely its own story. This story is setting up for a big adventure. It's the first in 3 books that will be coming out, and I would say if you are a fan of the Fable series or Spin the Dawn, I think you would really enjoy this book. This story is told in 2 points of view. First, we have Eden. She's 16 and has just been given the opportunity to become a teacher's assistant at the university that she works for. And this is game changing because she's kind of from less fortunate circumstances, but she's hardworking and she's put a lot of energy into getting to this point in her life. And so she's ready to step into this very exciting future. Her best friend Fallon and her boyfriend Miles are both from more privileged backgrounds. And while she gets along with them and she's able to kind of like mingle in their society, it's very clear that she doesn't fit in. And so she's trying to change herself in a way that fits into this world that she wants to belong to. Then we also get Hunter's point of view. Hunter is in the same circles as Eden. He works for Fallon's family and he is basically an indentured servant. His father left him with a lot of debt that he needs to pay off before he can kind of embrace his own freedom. And it is through Hunter's point of view that we learn about the magic system that is in place in this world. I don't want to go into too much detail because learning the magic system was one of the most exciting part of the books for me, and I want anyone who reads this to be able to enjoy that for themselves. But I will say it is unlike any magic system I haven't encountered in a book before. It was digestible and easy to understand, but still very magical and exciting to learn about. It involves a series of grimoires that the society uses to control the population. And there are rules in place to kind of govern this, but it's clearly to the advantage of the wealthy elite since they have more access to this magic. Hunter is given a unique advantage to this magic, however, because his father left him journals while studying these grimoires, and they are written in a code that only Hunter can decipher. Since this is the first book in a trilogy, a lot of the story is setting up for a really grand adventure, but it was still very enjoyable on its own merit as well. I think Erin Phillips is fantastic at writing dynamic character relationships, even though this is sort of a slow burn because it's kind of setting up for the bigger story. I really enjoyed the 2 points of view between Eden and Hunter. They're always circling each other and interacting with the same people, yet have different perspectives of them while having similar backstories. I think it's important to watch out for this as you read the book because that tension and duality I think will be important later on in the series. This book would also fall into the category of clean fiction, so you're not going to see anything, too explicit in this book, but she also doesn't dumb down a fantasy plot. There's clearly some evil in this world, and her stories recognize that sometimes evil does win, and it takes a lot of effort for good to prevail. So there is, this is a story of revenge, of regret, of harming others, but I also see a lot of potential for hope and reflection and forgiveness to come through in the later books. So I'm excited to see where Erin takes this. I think she's a fantastic writer, and I hope some of you in watching this journal spread will give it a shot because, I love supporting some indie authors out there and getting their stories in the right hands of the right readers. Coming back to the collage, I'm using the washi tape shop's washi tape called Cats and Books. I like this one a lot because they are kiss cut washi tape stickers that have to do with kind of more academia related things. So you've got some candlesticks and books and magnifying glass and paper and clocks and all different types of elements that I think work with any type of academia spread. And what you see me doing here is placing these washi stickers on white paper and then cutting them out again so that they have a more prominent white background behind them, and then they're more visible on the collage. But the nice thing is that if you're sticking them directly to a white journal page, they can overlap each other nicely and they kind of look more one with the page than a sticker with an outline. But sometimes I like that look. So today we made our own stickers essentially. And then I'm just finalizing this collage with a couple sparkly stars because you can never have too many sparkles anywhere. And going back to my Happy Planner flowers, this is something I completely forget about. I think I've had this book for, 5 years when I first started journaling, and I always forget about it. But having looked at the spread I did last year, I was reminded that those were in my storage. So I was excited to pull these out because I think these little gilded flowers just give a little bit of extra pizzazz to the corners of these pages without really distracting from the collage and the story. So, what do you think? Do you like this year's spread better? Do you like my last year's spread for Bond of Briars better? I'm curious to know your thoughts. I absolutely love it. Up next, we have Six Crimson Cranes and the Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. She is the queen of fairy tale retellings, and this is no exception. This time, we get a little bit of a Japanese fairy tale called Hachikazuki, in which a girl has a bowl on her head, which conceals her beauty. For this journal spread, I'm pulling out some crane origami paper that I thought matched that fairy tale very well, and some washi tape with some cranes on it. On the left, we have one from Amazon, and the right is from the washi tape shop. You can see the difference in how much tape you get with your purchase. I absolutely love the washi tape shop for this reason. And I love how the colors work very well with the origami paper that I already had. But I still really liked the pattern of this Amazon one as well. I just, am kind of disappointed that there isn't much of this roll for my money. Also from the washi tape shop is this fantastic roll of illustrations. This is PET tape, which has been gilded, so it's got some sparkles and gold running through it, which I'm obsessed with. And I decided I wanted to incorporate this image here for the Dragon's Promise, since our main character encounters many dragons along her journey. So starting with Six Crimson Cranes, this story follows Shiori, who lives in a land where magic has been outlawed. And this is difficult because she is the princess of this land and also happens to possess magic. Shiori keeps her magic hidden, really only using it to craft this cute little paper crane in which she names Kiki, and this little crane comes to life and becomes a friend to her. But then Shiori discovers that her stepmother also is a powerful sorceress. And upon discovering this, Shiori and her brothers are cursed. The stepmother turns her brothers into 6 crimson cranes and curses Shiori to not tell a soul. If Shiori speaks any words, one of her brothers will die for each word she speaks. So she is cursed to silence, and she also is forced to live with a bowl on her head. And I know that part seems a little bit questionable, but that is where the nod to the old Japanese fairy tale comes into play, and it makes perfect sense within the story. So, because she can't speak, she needs to rely on others to help her break this curse. So, we've got her paper crane friend. She becomes friends with a very powerful dragon. And she also befriends her betrothed that she worked so hard to like get out of this arranged marriage. And together, all of these different components come together to kind of fight this curse that has been bestowed on them. Then in The Dragon's Promise, the story continues. There is a new element at play in which there is a magical pearl in which Shiori needs to deliver back to a dragon realm. This story is quite different because it's taking place in a whole new world full of dragons, and you've got your own kind of rules and magic system in this book as well. Just as exciting, but just a little bit different. So you get a little bit of the continuation from the first story. And then this book leads into a third story, which I'm very excited to read, but have not had the pleasure to yet. And I know there are a lot of textures and elements in this spread, but I think the chaos perfectly represents the vibe of this story, and I think I love the spread overall. Like so many of you in the reading community, I had to pick up Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the 5th installment in the Hunger Games series, one of my all-time favorite series, and I was so excited to go back into this world. Oh gosh, this book was devastating. Honestly, it was so heartbreaking, but also fantastic. Like one of the easier 5 stars I've given this year. Like, is it just me or are the books getting better and better? It was fantastic. It honestly felt like I was reading the very first Hunger Games again, just through a new point of view. Anyway, this story follows Haymitch, which you may know him as one of the kind of coaches in the original Hunger Games. But this is his story when he's younger and when he's chosen for the Reaping. So, after being made a tribute in the Quarter Quell, which just means that they are taking twice as many tributes this year in honor of their 50th anniversary of the Hunger Games, Haymitch is chosen, and he says goodbye to his family and enters these games, and he's just resolved to do what he can to help the right person survive them. He's not planning to come out of this thing alive. So there are alliances formed, and Haymitch is kind of looking around at the other tributes and trying to determine who's going to make the appropriate victor, who's going to be the person that the capital will both celebrate, but that could also maybe make some change in this world, because he doesn't believe it can be him. And he decides that he's going to help that person win with, his best ability. I thought that this book was an incredible addition to the Hunger Games universe, and I only hope that Suzanne Collins continues to write these little prequels and spin-offs, because I will keep eating all of them up and crying a lot. The next book I read is This Vicious Grace, and for this spread, I wanted to use another illustration from the Washi tape shop. I loved this one because I thought it looked like our main character. Our main character, Alessa, is known as a Fenestra, which is kind of a powerful being in her land, and this power helps her keep her people safe. And one of her goals is to marry another powerful being, and through marriage, they can kind of amplify each other's power and keep their city safe. The problem is that Alessa has already been married 3 times, and each of her husbands has died because they couldn't handle her power. A priest in town kind of convinces his followers that she needs to be killed because something has gone wrong, and in fact, the gods did not bless her with this gift, and that, she's something else entirely. So she's got kind of this hit out for her, and she hires a bodyguard to keep her safe, because the ones that she already had, she doesn't know if she can trust. So then we meet said bodyguard named Dante, who has his own powerful secret, which kind of gives him an advantage specifically in interacting with her. I had a hard time reading this book. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked the kind of the romance in it and the found family element between Alessa and the other Fenestres. So that portion I really liked, but the world building and magic system was very confusing, and I didn't really understand the purpose of what a Fenestra really is. The book kept going on about how like she's the last hope and she's going to save this world, but I didn't understand what the threat was, so it made it kind of more difficult to understand. But overall, it was okay. I'd give that one a 3 stars. All right, it is time for the final flip. If you guys are interested in trying out any of these tapes I used from the Washi tape shop today, I've linked them all in the description below, and they have graciously given me a code for you guys to use for 10% off anything in their shop. By following these affiliate links, I do earn a small commission, but you know that's all going back to more washi tape so I can make more videos for you guys. So thank you so much for supporting me and my channel, and let's get into the final flip.